Welcome in. Okay, so I'm going to tie in the arithmetic sequence to the simple interest formula. All right. Now, for the arithmetic sequence, what we have is we want to be able to find the nth term, and it can be found from knowing the first term of the sequence plus the difference between the terms, and then it's going to be multiplied by n minus 1, where n is the term that you're looking for. Now, I have derived this. I'll put up a link up above there to the arithmetic sequence if you like. Now, the simple interest formula, so if you want to know the total sum of money, it is actually equal to the principal amount, so whatever you start off with, and it is added on, okay, or multiplied by 1 plus RT. Okay, so that typically is the formula where R is the interest that it's accumulating at, and T is the number of years that you have invested for. Now, if you look at these two formulas, they look completely different. Now, there will be some relation between the actual formulas. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just try to tie this in. My goal here will be to show you how the summation for the simple interest just comes from the arithmetic sequence. So I'm going to, if I factor this in, this would have been P plus PRT. Okay, so that's what I want you to kind of think about. So let's get started. Let's say that you initially started with some amount, whatever, 10,000, 1,000, 100,000. So I'm going to kind of show that, okay, initial amount right here. Now, so this would have been basically at year 0, okay? So this is your time frame as you keep going. So now this is at year 0. Now, at year number 1, you're going to get paid an interest. And that interest for simple interest, okay? So, okay, it is some R value. So it's going to be, say, maybe 8%, 5%, 10%, or whatever it may be. Now, to find out how much interest you would get, so it's not going to be, I mean, it depends what that interest might be, all right? So typically it's going to be definitely much less than what you would have, okay, than you start with. But let's say that was your interest, all right, that you got paid. So this is your principal. Now this is your interest. Now, what does that interest equal? Well, that interest is just equal to whatever you started with, multiplied by whatever the rate is. Now, it's only after 1 year. So this is going to be 1. So really, it's just P times R, right? So that's what your interest would be. And that's what you see here in the formula. So P times R is just your interest, okay? Now, in the following year, so if you continue this, so let's say year number 2, well, in simple interest, we do not add the interest on top of the principal. We just get paid the interest, and it's exactly the same every single year. So this continues. And in fact, you know, this would continue for every single year as long as you stay kind of invested. So this would have been year 3, you know, dot, 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 all the way, okay, up to some year, whatever, 20, 30, okay, we may not necessarily know, all right? So I'll call this, you know, T years. And that's what you see in here. So this is the T, okay? So notice that it's kind of relating to whatever you start with, whatever the interest R is, and then how many years are you invested for. And it should make sense that, well, if I really wanted to know how much I have, all I would do is I would just add up all of this, okay, together, and I would know how much I would obtain for the number of years that I've been invested, okay? So, fine. Now, how is this related to the arithmetic sequence? Well, so let me just show you. Well, if you think about the arithmetic sequence, so this is really because we start our sequences with term number 1, right? Then it would have been term number 2, term number 3, okay, term number 4, and so on, until, okay, this would have been your term number n, okay, that you would have. Now, for this, okay, so term number 1, if you start it off, well, term number 1 is just P, right? Term number 2, okay, what that is that's just P plus whatever that interest was, so interest I, okay, so that's your term number 2. Your term number 3, well, this turns out to be your principal, right, plus now 2 of the interests, okay, so this is after 2 years. So term 3 is actually just 1 ahead of how many years you've been invested. And, you know, you can probably kind of guess that, well, term number n is going to be P plus, okay, I plus I, and this keeps going, all right, so that you have, okay, n of these i's. So this is nothing else but just P plus, okay, and you have I multiplied by n, because you have n of them, right? Well, in the arithmetic sequence, what we have is, we have this little d in here. Now, what did the d mean for us in arithmetic sequence? It means that your sequence was continuously changing by some constant amount. So it's being, something was added or subtracted. Now, in this case, we're adding an interest. So it'd be positive, right? And that's exactly what happens here, right? Our difference in here, so our difference really is just our I, right? So between term 1 and term 2, it has grown by the interest. Between term 2 and term 3, it again has just grown by 1 interest. So our difference is our I. But remember, okay, so well, what was I? Well, I, okay, which is right here, is nothing else but just P times R, right? Because it's your principal times whatever, 10% or 8% or 5%, okay? And now, how many times did you do this? Well, you did it n times, right? So as you had this, or, you know, you were invested for T number of years, or you were borrowing for that long. So this entire thing really is just P plus. Now my I is PR, and this N, okay, which is the number of terms that you had, is just the number of years you were invested, which is your T. So if you really look at this, what we have is that if you write your original arithmetic sequence as this, so T1 plus the difference D, and it was n minus 1, then the principal is your first term, right? Because that's what you start with. Your difference between each term is just your interest, which is P times R. And then here, this n minus 1 that we have, because notice that the terms, because we're starting from term 1, so they're always 1 ahead of the number of years that you have, right? Which is T, okay? So T years. So it is, okay, so this T that we have in here is nothing else but just n minus 1. So if you were invested for 10 years, right, that means you would actually have 11 terms, because term 1 would be your principal, and then you would have, okay, at the end of the first year, second year, and so on, so you would have 10, okay, extra terms on top of the first one. And that's how it's actually tied in. So my S, okay, which typically stands for the summation, right, or sometimes people write F or future value or something. So it is nothing else but just an arithmetic sequence, with the difference being the interest that accumulates every single year. So, you know, if you have, let's, you know, take up a question. Let's say if you started off with $15,000 in the beginning, and let's say, you know, your simple interest was maybe 8% per annum, which means per year. Okay, so that's my interest, which is going to be 0.08 as a decimal. And that's what we substitute in the formula. Then if I wanted to know, let's say this, maybe after, I don't know, say 20 years. Okay. So after 20 years, and I plugged it into my arithmetic sequence. So now my term number 1 is 15,000 plus my difference in between is 15,000 multiplied by 0.08. So that is nothing else but simply your interest I. So in this case, it would have been 1,200. You can check that. Now, what is n? Well, how many terms will I have for 20 years? It's always one more. So this is 21. So this would have been 21 minus 1, which is 20, right? I'm going to just remove this and just put 20. And you can find out exactly how much money you would have in here. And if my calculation is correct, I think it's 39,000 that you would have in here. You can check that. So as you can see that what business students use, which is S, okay, and then you have P plus PRT, is exactly our sequence. And T is just simply the number of years. So that's where it comes from. All right. So I wanted to show you this because I think it's kind of useful to know to tie it in so that you realize that, yeah, we kind of do use these things in applications, but very often, you know, people forget to tie them in because they'll learn them in math and then they have no idea why the heck they were learning them. And then they see the application of it, but then the teachers never tell them where they come from. So here I just wanted to show you that if you've done grade 10 or 11 sequences and series, you actually can do some pretty neat applications, and one of them is simple interest. All right, so I hope that you found this useful. We'll see you in a future video. Bye, everybody.